It's a philosophy of going the extra mile. It's the do unto others. It's part of our mission statement is to follow the golden rule, and that really breaks down to treating other people as you want to be treated, giving the kind of service that you want to give. People don't talk about average service. People only talk about really great service or really lousy service. We want our customers to talk about us, but we want them to talk about us, our great service. That's what we're trying to get them to talk about. Average service, nobody talks about. We want them to talk about our great service. And we do a lot of things. Our employees look for ways to kind of go over the top. And in this company, they're rewarded when they do that. I hope there's hundreds of examples out there, and I hope there are 100 more still to come.
We'd like to welcome Greg Dow, minister with Central Church of Christ, to your invocation today. Greg?
Thank you. Bow with me, please. Father, we thank you today for the rain that you have sent our direction. Father, we will take the moisture whenever you desire to bless us with that, and we thank you for it. Father, this afternoon we want to lift up Amarillo, the city of Amarillo, Father, and the people of Amarillo. Father, I think of the families here in this city. I think of the college students, Father. Father, I think of the single mom who is trying to make ends meet. Father, I think of the business owner. For some of our grandparents, Father, for some of our multiple generation families, for the young couple that has moved here and has just started a job, or Father, for the international people that are here because of difficulties in their countries and they're seeking their dreams and hopes here. Father, we want to lift up all of the people of this city and lift them up to you. And especially this afternoon, Father, I want to lift up the leaders, those that you have commissioned, those, Father, that you are directing. And I pray, Father, that you will bless them and their families, and that you will give them discernment. And Father, I pray that you will give them compassion. And Father, I pray that you will work through them as they conduct city business and things of that nature. Father, we just pray for your presence. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen. Thank you for being here today, Greg. Will you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good afternoon. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Amarillo City Commission, held on the third floor of City Hall this Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. The first item of business on today's agenda is the minutes from last meeting, March 27, 2012. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes as presented? Okay. If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move for approval of the minutes as presented.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes with a 4-0 vote. The next item for business is the public hearing drainage utility. This item conducts a second public hearing on the proposed City of Amarillo drainage utility. The utility is proposed to provide dedicated funds for both capital and maintenance costs associated with construction, operation, and repair of city drainage system. Under Texas law, the utility is established as an enterprise fund, and monies collected shall be used only for the purpose directly related to the drainage system. The purpose of this hearing is to review the overall structure of the utility, the two draft ordinances necessary to implement the utility, and to solicit comments, inputs, and discussion for the City Commission's consideration and use. And so now, I don't know that we need any other explanation of that. We have one that we can provide, but for now, I think we would just open that up to questions from the public. Do we want to go through some presentation from George again, or do we want to just go to comments.
Mayor, might suggest we open it up for comments. We do have George Oswald here with us. Mr. Rice, Mr. Hagan are here from the city staff, and if there's any questions that we could speak to, any specifics that we could try to answer, we would be glad to.
Okay, great. So if we could ask for people to come forward and make comments, and when you come forward, ask a couple of things. We'd ask you to give your name and your address if you would, and then we would ask you to limit your comments to a 3-minute period if possible. So we'd ask for anyone to come forward and give a statement or comments or suggestions about the utility. Yes, sir.
I'd like to do that.
Please. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Bob Bybee. I live at 7505 Sleepy Hollow Boulevard in Amarillo. My zip is 79121. And I would like to address, first of all, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to address the commission, Mr. Mayor. But I would like to address the proposed drainage fee, or what I call a tax, on property owners within the city of Amarillo. I recognize the magnitude of the task facing you all as a commission. I also recognize that in serving, you are committed and dedicated to the task that you've been elected to perform, and I applaud you for that. However, I, along with others, question the wisdom in levying the proposed drainage tax, at least at the present time, and for the following reasons. Even though the Amarillo economy remains reasonably strong, individual resources are far from recovered. Many in Amarillo are still struggling financially just to make ends meet and to put gasoline in their automobiles. The drainage tax has far-reaching implications for reaching financial, for every citizen. It's true that the tax on each piece of residential property is not all that great. It would be minimal, $2 to $3 each month. And it was a remarkable gesture on the part of a person that presented last week, I think. A person with major business interest to withdraw his request for an exception. But you see, he can recover his portion of the tax by passing that cost on to his customers. The same is true with every business in town. The railroad was mentioned in the newspaper, but the railroad can pass its cost on to those receiving shipped goods. Retailers, to maintain a reasonable profit margin, will be forced to do the same. And what about Amarillo College? Will tuition increase because of the tax levied on them for this drainage project? And then there's county and city government. Will tax increases to the citizens be necessary to cover each governmental entity's drainage tax? So how will we calculate the real cost to the proposed drainage tax to each one of us? I urge you to give careful consideration to this proposal before final approval, because you see, ultimately, regardless of who the tax or the drainage fee is levied against, the taxpayer is the ultimate source of payment. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who is taxed. The individual citizen will pay either through increased grocery bills, increased gasoline costs, increased education, or increased city, county, hospital district, or college taxes. And as a follow-up, and with all due respect, I would have to ask, why up to the fact that we need $66 million to solve this problem. Apparently, it's been accruing for many years. Does it have anything to do with downtown revitalization? Will any of these monies be used for downtown drainage? I trust not, because the downtown project was sold to the public with the promise of no new taxes.
Mr. Bobby, I must ask if you could limit your comments. We're about 4.5 minutes down.
I'm finished.
Thank you.
I just want to close by saying thank you for the time, for giving me the opportunity to raise what I feel to be relevant concerns.
Certainly. Mr. Bobby, maybe we could answer some of those to a degree, because they are important questions. And if you want to remain at the podium, or if you want to sit down, either one.
Doesn't matter.
I think they're very good questions and things that we have considered as a commission. Certainly have hired consultants to try and deal with some of these things. None of us want to raise these fees if it's not necessary. And yet, as you pointed out, we have to deal with the reality of what's discovered in the needs for the city. The thing that is interesting to us is there was actually a commission, a study commissioned back in 1993 or 4. It was finished in 95, and it already identified $50 million worth of projects. Now, I understand it's been very difficult to partial out that kind of monies to dedicate it to that without it being used for other things, and it would take substantial tax increase to do that. We want to dedicate this money to a fund so we can deal with this. As the city's grown 20,000 people the last 10 years, we've seen that development. We've seen maps of southwest Amarillo all around the loop. We've seen maps of other parts of the city that are growing north. Since 1995, we think about how much it's grown in the northwest part of town. Now we know that we're predicting another 20 to 30,000 people in the next 10 years. We feel like it's sort of a snowball rolling downhill that has to be addressed at some point. And we think that there are some costs that are hidden if we don't address it. For instance, we gave the example last week of the 9th Street, sort of what I call a disaster, when the water came up over the embankment, dug away the underpinnings, caused the street to be dug out, and it was closed for a little less than 6 months, I think, but it was a $500,000 repair. The cost was held down because TxDOT needed some conduit, some pipe from underneath there. We had to move it here, but there was the thought that for a maintenance project that we don't have now, maintenance money that we can go out and inspect those and get ahead of that, we may have solved that for $5,000 or so. So if we compound that to the rest of the city and look at areas that are being flooded, we know they're being flooded. We get calls on hotlines whenever there's raining from different parts of the city. And if you heard the pleas of those citizens that said, look, it's going to rain. I know, there is no doubt in my mind, my house is going to get flooded. What can we do about that? I think there's concerns on all parts, and I think we've arrived at a point that we can't delay this sort of thing inevitably. The other part is that it will take a number of years to do it. If we had all the monies immediately, we could not complete the projects for several years. And we just feel there has to be a beginning point where we start to address this and deal with it. It'll take time, but we have to address it and deal with it. So I know that we can't ever pick a perfect time to do these things. The stock market's up, the market's down, the economy's tougher or not. We think that, in my view, we had to move towards something to address these issues. We wouldn't be acting responsibly if we didn't begin to address them, in my view. But you certainly have good questions. There are things that we've heard about before. Passing the costs on, that's an important part of it. And I understand businesses can do that, and individuals can't, but it is an important part of the structure of the city, and it'll become more important as we grow. I appreciate your question.
I will say this, that the state has exempted all higher educational institutions. So Amarillo College, because the state has made that decision, will be exempt from this.
It's not an option for us. There are a few state exemptions. The city's not exempt. We'll pay that ourselves.
But even those will be passed on to the taxpayer, even the exemption.
Certainly, there's no question. The day of the free lunch is certainly not here. It never has been, and it never will be. You're right.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
a couple of other points. Of course, today there are no hospital district taxes. Zero, none, not that's collected from this drainage utility fee can only be used for drainage situations and problems and repairs and maintenance. It cannot be used to buy a fire truck. It can't be used to hire new policemen. It can't be used for anything else besides drainage.
Mr. Sims, you say there's no hospital district taxes.
No, sir.
That somebody subsidizes indigent care?
Well, the contract from the hospital was sold some 11 or 12 years ago. The contract provides a stream of money going back to Universal Health Services or Northwest to provide the indigent care from the pile of money that was put together when the hospital was sold. It's running about, about $6-7 million a year.
About 6.9.
6-7 million a year. So.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. May I ask, Mr. City Manager, we asked a question last week. It came from some of the questions here in last week. Could we put up the 2 slides that show something that we all wanted to know is how are we in alignment with other cities that first have a drainage utility fee, and secondly, how does it show when you combine that with our property tax? And what does that really look like? How are we? Somebody said we were patting ourselves on the back, and if we're due a pat in the back, the whole city needs that, because if you compare it to the other parts of the state, I think there's some credence in the thought that our city's been managed very well. Could you show us those 2 slides and explain those?
Certainly, Mayor, be glad to. We have the one to speak to the first part of the question up on the screen right now. This is the same information that we had last week, but it was actually in an alphabetical list, so it was very difficult to discern anything from it. What you see here are the cities in this general category, their existing drainage utility fees. The bar shows up, I guess, on here in white. It's a different color on paper, but that's the proposed Amarillo. So you see Abilene slightly under Frisco, under about 50 cents, and then moving to the bottom of the scale, you see that city at actually $12 a month. So that's just a scattering of what's out there for existing fees with Amarillo's proposed fee in white. For the quote typical home, yes ma'am. The second item, second slide speaks to the second question. That's what does it look like when you incorporate the tax rates? To create this slide, what was done was take the existing tax rates for the cities listed at the bottom, apply that to a $100,000 home, and then divide it by 12. So you're basically creating a quote monthly ad valorem tax load, and then added on top of that is either the existing or the proposed drainage utility fee for those same cities. Doing so produces this slide, Amarillo at the left. Using that $100,000 home as the example, it's $29.18 a month. And then you can see how that carries back across the page, ending up on the far right over there at about $86 a month for that particular city. And there's a pretty strong cluster or trend that you can see that keeps a lot of these kind of in that $51 to $62 range, and then your outliers to the left and to the right.
The important thing to me about this slide is this is based on a $100,000 valuation. If you switch this slide to the average cost of a home in the state, areas like Frisco would have a very high cost per home, raising that proportionately. So this is a good, fair, modest evaluation of what it is. If you put the actual cost of the average home in these different cities, our savings would be magnified considerably. And we could actually produce that in the next week if we wanted to. It's not, well, we'd have to gather a lot of data on each city.
We would, Mayor, and might suggest the part of the magic of picking the $100,000 home. If you'll recall, during our budget process every August, when tax rates are calculated in Texas and they're published and they're posted, the $100,000 home is the example. It's actually required by state regulations in many cases, and it does normalize it. You take a Frisco, the average home value is probably $50,000 to $60,000 per unit higher than Amarillo, so certainly it skews that chart, but it also drives significantly more revenue towards that city.
And also part of this ordinance that we're proposing today, we're looking at today, is is included in that is that this 251 will be designed to remain static for 5 years.
It's suggested it is. It's not required to be. In full disclosure, it's not required, but it's suggested that it could be. And it could be longer. It's just hard to say. That gives us enough money to deal with the first issues. There's $66 million in projects that are identified now. Today, in 1995, there were 50 million. Today, with 66 million, it's going to take a while to do all of those. And so we're proposing that we bond forward $12 million, which we can put that much work together, begin the projects, and then do that again and again until these projects are completed. And I think that says that it's, it would be wrong to say it's going to go away. Somebody asked that question. There's just not the opportunity to do that and complete these, and of course we have to pay the bonds off too. So we want people to understand what we're doing, but I think this slide does verify that we are careful about expenditure, and I would invite anybody in the room to please come to our budget meetings when we talk about expenditures and how tight we are with this money. I think the proof's in the pudding. If you read this slide, it's hard to argue that we aren't very fiscally responsible. And when we go and talk to bonding agents, one of the reasons we're able to is because we have so little debt that we're able to demand or to command a AAA bond rating, which saved us, what was it, $500,000 on the reissuance of the $16 million for the money for Mesa Petroleum's water, for our part.
For the part of the water purchase from I believe
Saved
that's
us
correct.
$500,000 on that just because of the rate decrease from what it was to AAA. So we're looking at those things as an important part of this too. Please, could I ask someone else to come forward who'd like to make a comment? How are you today, sir?
Good evening. I'm Doug Hershey. I live at 6406 Cromwell, 79109. First of all, I'd like to thank the mayor. I visited with him at an earlier date about my concerns, and he offered to meet with me. But I have not had taken the time to meet with you, but I do appreciate you offering that to me. I feel like, let me tell you, I own or have invested in 2 or 3 commercial properties around town, and as a landlord, we've got our rates locked in for multiple years. As a landlord, we're going to have to eat this increase in taxes until we renew the rates. I think this concept, the whole thing, is way too large and far-reaching. And like it was pointed out earlier, the bottom line is Joe Schmuck, the normal, regular guy, is going to be wind up paying for this. Both when I raise the rent to my tenants, then they're going to charge more for their services. And it's all going to, everybody's going to have to pay more, and you're just taking more money out of our pockets. That I'm not so sure that we need that the drainage is that big of a deal. I see the slides. I noticed that we don't have any slides up there of the towns like our size that don't have this drainage tax. And there must be some. I don't see Midland up there anywhere. So, and they're kind of our size. Another concern is, right now we're doing like you pointed out, the $5,000 maintenance project on 9th Street that's coming out of general revenues. Well, this is going to free up money for general revenues that I think is going to go to pet projects that we've already got set up, like the downtown deal. Another thing I'd like to point out, I was an investor in Greyhawk, and if I remember correctly, when we set up Greyhawk, even though we're not part of the city, we were within the
ETJ?
There you go. And we had to pay some drainage tax before we did anything. I mean, just to whatever, we had to pay the drainage tax. So, as a developer, I've already paid a drainage tax, and now then I'm paying another one. So, that's just a couple of things there that I want to point out. Thank you.
Mr. Hershey, thank you. And I'd be happy to meet with you individually and go over some of these things. There is no doubt it's going to cost everybody in the town, but I think it would cost us more not to move ahead. In my view, looking at the things that are there projected, that if we avoid this, certainly the costs aren't going to decrease. There was one question I thought, George, there was one question back in there. You made some good points, but it seemed like there was a question about the drainage fees in the other towns that are our size. May I ask our expert here, our consultant, he really is a good expert on this issue.
I'm George Oswald with SB Consultants. Of the large cities in the state, the only ones that do not, that are 200,000 in population range like Amarillo, the only two that do not have drainage utilities are Brownsville and Corpus Christi, to put that in perspective. There are 85 of these in place in the state currently. So it is the process that the more progressive cities are following to address their drainage management needs.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Would someone else please? How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing fine. I'm Gilbert Zamora, live at 6600 Slater Circle, 79110. And I guess the main question I have is that have we done any kind of study as for soil infiltration rate or percolation testing that goes on a person's lawn? I went on the internet. They told me how to do about a percolating absorption rate test. I did testing on my lawn. It would take a 3-inch rain before I had any runoff that would ever meet the gutter and go into the storm drainage system. We haven't had a 3-inch rain in Amarillo, Texas in 2 years. We haven't had a 1-inch rain in a very long time.
Touche.
I know we don't have any control over that, but we do have control over the taxes, and that's what it is. This is a tax that you're proposing on top of people. And just basing that runoff coming off of my house, the only thing that hits the gutter is what comes off my house and hits my driveway. That's only 10% of my roof area. The rest of it should never hit that storm drain, yet I and everybody else that owns property in this town is going to pay this tax. And it,
Go ahead. You got it.
okay. Anyway, 5 to 10% of that is all that's ever going to hit that storm drain, unless we have a 3-inch rain. And God, we pray that we can get one of those one of these days. So the main people that has this runoff is people with large parking lots, Walmarts, we're talking churches, we're talking schools. The only exemption I've heard is Amarillo College. So again, this tax is going to be rolled into and sent down the line, like this gentleman said a while ago, that everybody's going to have to pay that extra money. You tell me there's no free rides. Well, another thing that concerns me is that being that we didn't get the single-member district voted into here, I'm afraid, and me being living in South Amarillo, I know for sure that Southwest, you already mentioned Southwest, West, and Northwest Amarillo, and never mentioned anything about North Amarillo, East Amarillo. I'm sure they all have drainage problems, yet all you mentioned was what I'm going to call the richer side of town.
I was calling growth rates, but every area of town is going to be a drainage.
And speaking of that growth rate, looking at the 10,000 people you're predicting to come into there, 50% of them are going to live in apartments. They're not going to build a home, and we know that because as soon as we build an apartment, they fill up. So, you're going to have to run your numbers, I think, a little bit better as to how many actual square foot area you're going to be going into that runoff area. And like this last gentleman just said, I think we're far reaching. We're talking about $66 million when you said, oh, we need to get started at 12. And why can't we do it in incremental range and do it that way? Because we are in hard times.
Thank you, sir. May I ask George to answer some of those percolation calculations? A little more technical than we probably have the ability to answer. We've heard an explanation.
I would be surprised if there would be no runoff for a 3-inch rain. I'm not an expert in the soil conditions here, but a little uncomfortable challenging that, but a 3-inch rain on what I think the types of soils are out here, there would be significant runoff.
But people are going to be charged on that pervious area only, not their lawns. So just driveways and rooftops,
That's right.
sidewalks.
That's how,
Now,
that's.
sidewalks are not included in the calculation because they're in the public right of way, which is drainage features and stuff.
Not
So it's-
sidewalks.
So it's
Go ahead. and explain that.
driveways, rooftops, and walkways. You know, if there's a walkway from the front door coming down to the sidewalk, that's included, and outbuildings, things like that.
But grassy areas.
Grassy areas are
included
not.
into the-
That's correct.
fee.
And next, please. Yes, sir. How are you today?
Good. My name's Al Alford, 929 South Mountain. Am I to assume that the more people move into town, the more taxes the existing people are going to get taxed?
No, sir.
Well, you said another 20,000 in the next 10 years. Do they have to have more drainage?
But it doesn't mean their tax would be any higher than, yours wouldn't be any higher than theirs. They're gonna pay taxes if they move.
I know,
in.
but they haven't paid any. Whereas we would start paying as of whenever you want to decide. Now, when a new subdivision gets built, who pays for the road, sidewalks, and all that, sewers?
Those people do through the development costs that are passed along to the homeowners. That is correct, Mr.
That is correct. Yeah, I heard otherwise.
I'm sorry.
I said I heard otherwise.
No, it would be the people that purchase the homes in that area as it's distributed.
I work construction on my house, so. Okay, but that one about the 20,000 people coming in, they don't pay for that drainage. It's the people up here that been paying for that drainage.
Well, I think it goes back to some of what Mr. Zamora said, is that certainly they may move in their apartment first, but they may not live their life there. They move out.
Right.
I think the realtors here would like to see them move out into a home. So I don't know how to, the state's given us certain areas that are exempted, there aren't too many, and I think it is something shared by everybody here in a way.
Well, one thing that's not done is put the sewers down deeper, because you take the underpass and I mean, they get flooded every time. And one guy drowned. The highway system's all screwed up. If you're gonna do anything, put the sewers deeper.
Mr. City Manager, isn't all of that part and parcel of this is to help clean out some of those areas?
We absolutely do, especially the 3rd and 10th Street underpasses, which is where I think you're talking about the latest fatality. We actually have some stuff underway. Probably can't get the water out of it as quick as we want, but I think we've got a way to prevent people from getting into it like they've done in the past. The stuff that you're talking about on I-40, that belongs to the state, that's TxDOT, and certainly we know there's a couple of those that could stand improvement.
May I ask where you put it?
Where you put what?
The water.
The water. I mean, you're not digging deep and from the new sewers.
From where?
Well, from everywhere it is.
How do we get it out of those low areas to the upper areas? We pump it in some cases.
In some cases, it is pumped. In general, the gravity, the storm sewer system in Amarillo is gravity flow. And it flows into one of the different modified plazas that are around town. We try to have those sized that they can hold an appropriate size rain event. After the event's over, all of those plazas have got big pumps in them, and then we start moving the water out. And when it moves out, generally, not absolutely, but generally, it's moving to the north and into one of the tributaries of the Canadian.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Homer. Appreciate you being here.
Mr. Mayor, I would just like to make a couple of points. The downtown revitalization has been brought up. The funds from this drainage fee are only going to be used for drainage projects and ratifications, et cetera. We're not going to use that money for anything other than that. If it happens to be a drainage problem downtown, obviously, the drainage will be taken care of. And also, this is part of the city's comprehensive plan that was initiated, what, in 2009, Kelly, is that correct? Where our citizens had an opportunity to input and what they want the city to look like 20 to 30 years from now, because we hadn't had a plan that had been looked at for over 20 years. And so this is just part of that parcel of looking to the future of Amarillo and how we look at the growth in the city and how we manage it so that we have a good city that is planned accordingly and that we can all make it a viable place to live. So I just want to make sure that people understood that this money is not going to anything having to do with the downtown revitalization plan.
And to Mr. Zamora's point, along with what you're saying, is that all parts of the city will get this. It is not in just the developed areas. And in fact, in the developed areas, the developers pay that and the people moving in, that cost is passed along, but then they get the normal rate once they have their water system hooked up. But it will absolutely address every part of the city. And some of the older parts of the city are the worst parts that need more help than other parts. Would you agree?
Well, absolutely. The oldest stormwater system in the entirety of this town is sitting underneath us right here. It's the downtown system. It's coming on 100 years old.
But I will tell you that there's absolutely no connection between downtown development and any of this utility that we're talking about enacting. I mean, there's no tie at all between that. And I would be happy if somebody wants to get more verification, I can sit down with anybody and kind of go through those numbers and show you that that just is not the case. But I'd be happy to take whatever time somebody wants to do that aside from here. May I ask for other comments then? Thank you, sir. Please, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Don McCall, and I live at 930 West Bonita. I understand the problems that the city has with drainage. I have seen some of the problems. These are problems that we've had for, I guess, 40 or 50 years, and so the city has not taken care of it. A lot of these problems are man-made. The big flood we had out of Dunham Lake was man-made. It was lack of planning on the part of the people that own the lake. They did not pump it down, and therefore, when we had that huge rain at that time, it did cause a huge flood. Since the city has taken over control of that lake, we have not had a problem. However, the concern I have basically two concerns. One is a $3 fee per lot or per home. It doesn't sound like much, but when that's added on to the other taxes that we have, and this is a in-play for taxes, it does add up, especially for those of us on fixed income. Now, I don't want to pass all this on to the young kids. I understand that. We should pay our fair share as well. But it seems like to me this is just a tad high. Also, once the cat's out of the bag, what is to keep this fee at the rate that it is now? What's to keep it within reason? In 4 or 5 years, you may double that, you may quadruple it. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I really believe this all be put to the citizens for a vote. Do we or do we not want to do this and pay the price? Another thing you might want to look at might be a sales tax, like we have for the Community Development Fund, to fund this. Maybe a quarter cents on a dollar or something like that that would go into a fund. Would that be more equitable than charging everyone, including the businesses, an extra fee that amounts really to taxes? And these are the only concerns I have. I understand there's problems. I understand that the deaths that were caused were, again, human error. The young man that drowned over by Amarillo Boulevard, he wanted to play in the water. I wanted to play in that water, and he got tangled up in that fence. I have played in water like that. 2 young girls at Meta Park, a drainage system that was really supposed to be working and did a good job. They were enticed by flowing water. Though it wasn't the drainage problem so much as it was human error. The people that drowned in the underpass, that was human error. Now, I will admit that the pumps from the underpass didn't remove the water like it probably should. Perhaps there ought to be a light system or something that tells people, hey, this is flooded, don't come in. People living in this area should understand that you don't go into those places during a heavy rain. But I understand people do that. And I thank you for your time.
Mr. McCall, you make very good comments. May I answer some of those or
Sure.
attempt to a degree? There really are important comments and things that we have had to look at in some regard. There are provisions in here suggesting a 4 or 5 year time limit. The way this has been produced is we know basically what it's going to take to get this project going. And it's a large amount, $66 million. We will do $12 million increments approximately at the beginning. And that's the amount of work that we can get done in a reasonable amount of time with the type of contractors we have come in. It will take a period of time for that to change. I don't foresee that we will have a change in that or a need to change that in the foreseeable future to fund the projects that are on the board. We've tried to be very above board about this. You're exactly right. It does not prevent somebody from doing this to raise it later on, not a year from now, not 5 years from now. And the only thing that helps with that is that you elect good people that will honor what they need to do. And that's really it. I mean, that's the part of the democratic process that I think has to take place for this to work properly. We all know that we're at risk if we do something like this, if we want to continue in this, but we think that it's a strong responsibility. We have to face that. The cat is sort of out of the bag, but you always control the bag, and there's no question in my mind about that. It's very important that you do that and exercise it. I'm glad you're here. There is not an ability to fund it through a sales tax. We are at the capped tax the state of Texas allows, so it cannot be a sales tax. The only option that we would see is a property tax or a fee. The reason we did not do a property tax increase, the primary reason in my mind is, and I'm not saying it isn't more money out of your pocket. It absolutely is. I don't think you can disguise that. It is. There's no question about it. But we can't hold the money and direct it unless we do a user fee that goes into what's called an enterprise fund, things that we're all learning about, where it's dedicated. A future commission can't take that out and change it. They've got to work on these projects. When we start to bond these projects forward, it also requires that we know that money's going to that and it's going to pay for that. And so it really helps us keep our feet to the fire that we don't start looking in other areas. There is nothing to prevent a future commission to come in and raise taxes to do this and then establish a fee on top of that. And so we're trying to face it at the root source of how much we need to fix this and start to deal with it. And it won't happen overnight. We couldn't put enough shovels in the ground to deal with all this, or there'd be no ability to cross the city. We'd have too many projects going on. But your questions are good, and I hope we've tried to address some of them. We have the same concerns, and I tell you that we have to deal with some of those safety concerns. And one of the things that you might find interesting is I've heard there's already been a suggestion that we try and restrict people from driving into the underpass on 10th. There's some discovery of whether that's possible, right?
It is possible, and they're actually arranging the technology to let us do that now for both sets, the 3rd and the 10th Street. And today, the system is that we physically go and do that in the middle of an event. These would be gates that we could just activate. They flash and light, and please don't go down there. And I expect that you'll see those here pretty quick.
Would these be actual gates that come across the highway or road?
They will. They're barriers that will come out from the side.
Okay. We've tried to look at this with the help of consultants and the help of a lot of planning, very comprehensively. And we hope we're doing that and don't expect that we'll be back with any kind of change to this in the near future at all. I don't think this commission expects that at all. We've been very careful to ask the staff to present it so that we know it's well done and won't need to be increased. Now, it doesn't prevent somebody else from doing it. We'd be all misleading to say it wouldn't, but you can prevent that as well as anybody. Your vote.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else, please?
Mayor Hall, Commissioners, Les Foy, 6416 Moorgate, Assistant Superintendent of Amarillo ISD, and as I was here last week and first in line, I thought I would wait this week to allow others to present. And again, I come on behalf of Amarillo ISD asking for the Commission to consider exempting public school districts from the fee. As mentioned in the previous letter, you have before you a letter that was signed by our board officers stating their support of the request for an exemption. But as been talked about earlier with regard to tax rates, I think it's important for me maybe to make a point about Amarillo ISD and how our tax rate works and how it's different from other public entities in Amarillo. And that is, one, our board has no further authority to raise the tax rate. The only way that the board can raise the tax rate is to go to the voters for an election. That occurred in 2008, and our tax rate has remained the same since then and will remain the same, barring legislative action, until the next election is held for a tax rate increase. So the ability for the school district to manage an increase in fee, which is estimated to be $9,000 per month for us, is going to be a little different than other entities might, have the ability to do. And secondly, as mentioned in the letter, and I'll just briefly say, we're in historic budget times for public schools in Texas, just like we are in the U.S., but in Texas, some things have happened that haven't happened in some 6 decades. And budgets have been cut, and we're not the only ones that are being affected, but certainly as one of the lower funded districts in the state, our ability to manage through this is going to be rather difficult. And so that is why we're before you asking for the exemption on behalf of the public schools. Thank you.
Mr. Wright, thank you. I want to compliment the school system for working so closely to the city on so many projects, and it's important to us to certainly consider what your views are, and we'll look at that.
I will say that the only part of this drainage fee that's giving me pause is the school district, and I'm torn because I know school financing is a mess, to say the least, and you all are capped out when it comes to the amount of money that you're able to raise. You can't really increase the money that's coming in. On the other hand, there's a lot of schools in Amarillo, and a lot of rooftops, and a lot of parking lots, and so you have a lot of the city's drainage you depend on as well.
I understand. And
go ahead.
I may make one more point, and that is that's different with school districts than other public entities. As property values rise in Amarillo, my taxes go up, but our total revenue for Amarillo ISD does not, because the state says, okay, you're wealthier, so now we're going to take away an equal amount of money from you so that you basically stay flat as property values rise. That hasn't always been the case, but it is the case today.
Yeah. And if you wanted us to vote on that, whether that's fair or not, I think we can tell you how we vote. But it still is it's an important concern. Thank you for presenting it again.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here. Anyone else, please? Certainly welcome any other comments. These are important to us, and they do impact us. We have tried to do our due diligence before this was presented to try and come up with opportunities for discussion. We tried to question each other about this. We are not, we respect all of the questions, and we've tried to have some sort of answers for this through the consultants and through our city staff. And but we do have things that we've all made notes about. We'll question. We have next week too for public comment. If not, any other comments? Are there any comments from the commissioners at this part of the hearing?
Well, I think one of the healthiest things we've done, Lily brought it up, one of the healthiest things we've done as a community is come together as a community and create this comprehensive plan. And a huge part of the comprehensive plan is thinking forward, especially when it comes to streets and drainage. And that's why I've been really interested that this commission has looked at streets and drainage both, and that instead of having, when it comes to drainage, instead of having a property tax increase for drainage, we've looked at this fee because I want something that's going to go forward and continue to have to go directly to the problem of drainage. So I'd a lot rather see something that's guaranteed to be designated to fix this problem. And I think whoever said that, we're just now looking at this and we've got $66 million, in problems that we have to fix. I too think that's a shame that the city hasn't looked at this before. And I think as residents of the city of Amarillo, we are all in this covenant together that we have to pool our money to have the kind of community we want to have. I don't know, as I said, it gives me pause, the public schools, because I know, Les, that, that you're in a world of hurt when it comes to money. And at the same time, think of all the schools in Amarillo and all those rooftops and all the parking lots. So that does give me pause.
Yes, Mr. Sims.
If I could, Mr. Mayor, in response a little bit to comment by Commissioner Green, we look at this problem every year when we do the budget. And when it comes to the time in the budget for the allocation of our capital funds, which is what it would take to do these drainage problems, it's limited. It'll be anywhere from 3 to 5 million, Mr. City Manager, a year.
For the total general fund capital.
Yes, that we're allocating. And we have been addressing these in little bitty pieces that just don't get the job done. And we practically had no inspection, if you will. And the problem keeps being referred to as the one on 9th Street. Had we had the money dedicated and the staff available and the funds available, that probably would have been caught at a $5,000 repair level as opposed to a $500,000 do-over. So we simply hadn't had the funds to do all that needs to be done on any given year in any area. But this is one way to address this problem that is citywide.
I think a point there is that when we're saying we have $3 to $5 million for capital projects, we have lists of capital projects that are required for every department in the city. So it doesn't matter whether it's streets or parks or utilities or the service yard or vehicles or whatever it is. We've got $3 to $5 million distributed, and that therein lies the problem. Each year, these things get funneled off, and so if we have this dedicated fund, it will not get funneled off. It will be used for this so that we won't be paying for extreme amounts later on as we grow. So, any other comments? Then with no other comments, I'd ask that we close the public hearing. And let's move on to the ordinances. And there are a couple that pertain to this. Ordinance number This is the second of 2 ordinances necessary to establish and implement proposed drainage utility. Are there any comments about that particular ordinance from the audience? Any from the commission? And I would ask Mr. City Manager if you could tell us what the appeals process would be. I understand that would be probably used more for commercial than home, but what is that appeals process? I'm sorry I kind of surprised you with that, but.
Mayor, I think that's an excellent question and one that we ought to come over. I'm also going to ask Mr. Rice and Mr. Oswald to be ready. The appeal process is covered, it's on page 7 of the draft, it's section 18.4.16. And it does apply to any user. This is if the user believes that the way the schedule has been applied, that's that $2.51 for the typical and then the associated fees. If that's not fairly reflecting the cost of service to that property, if the user disputes the amount of the impervious area used to calculate the drainage charge, or if the charge has been assessed in error, they can avail themselves then of the process. To do this, it does allow for an adjustment of the drainage utility charge. The user, the individual or business making the protest, has the burden of proof. If they have paid drainage charges and they believe the calculation thereof was not correct, they can submit a request for an adjustment to do that. They have to do so in writing. The city is obligated through the Director of Public Works to respond within 20 days from the date of the receipt of an adjustment request. Adjustments, of course, will be prospective going forward, meaning if there's a mistake or it needs to be changed, it will be changed. But it could also be retroactive for a period of time not greater than 3 months or 3 billings prior. And if I could digress just briefly as part of how this works, should the commission approve this, there will be a set of sample bills that go out in August. When those sample bills go out, everybody will get them, all the different accounts in the city will get them. Would encourage everybody, please look at that. At that time, see, does this look right? Does this look dramatically different from what I was told or what I expected? and give us a chance, give you a chance, because you don't pay that bill. That is only a test, it's only a sample. Let's start working on it, let's get in here and see what we can fix. Again, presuming this goes forward, there's not a, quote, real bill until October the 1st of this year, so that this isn't something that's happening next week, next month. Back into the appeal process, again, a perspective or a going forward adjustment, up to 3 bills going backwards. The user has to provide information. They may provide information at their cost to us to help us make those calculations. It could be things put together by a registered surveyor, documentation of impervious area. If they don't give us the reason, hey, you said I have a driveway that's 4,000 square feet and I really only have a 2,000 square foot driveway. If we don't have that information, we can't make that adjustment. The Director of Public Works has 10 days after the receipt of the request for the adjustment or additional information to rule. Once the ruling has been made, there is an appeal panel or an appeal process from that does not include the person who made that original determination. The way your ordinance is structured, that would be the chief building official, the planning director, and either an assistant city manager or the deputy city manager to hear that appeal. They also are obligated to do so within 10 business days from receiving that. There is, of course, a final appeal. Ultimately, this is the ordinance that belongs to the city commission. So after we've gone through the process, if the user is still not satisfied, it may come to the city commission, providing they have followed the process.
Okay. I think
A question, Mr. City Manager. The sample bill that will go out in August, will it have, what kind of data will be on there?
I'm not sure that they've actually written the bill format. It will state, I presume, the equivalent residential unit. I don't know if I'm looking at George or Michael, but one of you.
It's not George.
It's Michael.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to put that on George. Come on, he's out of town.
Well, what we're looking at basically is looking at the information. It's probably going to be in a postcard format, which will go to that property owner or resident. And it will have the total amount that will be there, and it will also probably have that equivalent residential unit. You're exactly right, those two pieces.
Okay. And that can be used to backtrack equivalent residential units, that typical $2.51, 2,800 square feet impervious cover. And then you can track through that exactly what you were assessed against.
Well, I think we will get questions, and certainly we want the staff to deal with those questions. They're prepared to do that. For instance, Mr. Zamora, to go out and do your percolation study and absorption study. First time I heard about that sort of thing was a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to get people with questions. We want to answer those questions so that you're satisfied at least it gets done in a just way, whatever's done. But thank you for that comment too. Okay. So where in the world are we? Do we have any other comments from the commission? Do we have any comments from the audience about this ordinance number 7323? From the commission? Not entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 7323.
Second.
Although we have a motion and a second, all those in favor of ordinance number 7323 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes with a 4-0 vote. Ordinance number 7324. This is the first reading of an ordinance changing the zoning of 8.06 and a 28.18 acre tract of section 135, block 2, ABNM survey, Potter County, in the vicinity of Hastings Avenue and Grand Street, to change from agricultural district to light commercial district and heavy commercial district, respectively. This is recommended for approval by a 7-0 vote of the Planning and Zoning Commission. And could we get an explanation of that?
Certainly, I'm going to ask Mr. Kelly Shaw, Planning Director, to walk us through that and kind of set the stage on where that is. You can see the old racetrack there to the north. Kelly?
Be happy to. This zoning request is in the vicinity of Hastings and Grand Street. The request is to change approximately an 8-acre tract of land from agricultural to light commercial, and approximately a 28-acre tract of land from agricultural to heavy commercial. Given the existing uses that are in the immediate area to the east, which include a concrete batch plant and a trucking facility, The Planning and Zoning Commissioners felt that it was appropriate to establish the commercial zoning west of the existing heavy commercial zoning. However, approving the light commercial zoning, which is more restrictive than the heavy commercial, where it is across the street from existing residential development east on the east side of Grand. They felt the request was appropriate and approved it unanimously, however, with the stipulation that they would recommend to discourage any further encroachment of commercial zoning southward as you get closer to the 24th Grand intersection because of established retail and residential development in that area.
Do we have any comments from the audience about ordinance number 7324? Any comments from the commission? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move for approval of ordinance number 7324.
I second that motion.
A motion and a second for ordinance number 7324. All those in favor of that ordinance? Opposed? That passes with a 4-0 vote. Ordinance number 7325. This is the first reading of an ordinance changing the zoning of Tascosa Estates Unit Number 8 in Section 11, Block 9, BS&F Survey, Potter County, in the vicinity of Fairway Drive and La Costa Drive, to change from Planned Development District 165C to amended Planned Development 165D for single-family detached home development. It is recommended for approval by a 7-0 vote of the Planning and Zoning Commission. And would anybody require an explanation of that from the audience or from the commission? Okay, if not, I'd entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 7325.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of 7325?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes with a 4-0 vote. Appointments to boards and commissions. Appointments are needed to the following boards. The Animal Control Board is a 3-year term to replace Jenna McFall, who has resigned. Do we have any nominations for that position?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we accept Gina McFall's resignation and in her place appoint Brooke Prescott to a 3-year term.
I would second that.
Is there any questions about this appointment from the audience? From the commission? Okay, all those in favor of this appointment as presented?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes with a 4-0 vote. Consent agenda. It's recommended that the following items be approved and that the city manager be authorized to execute all documents necessary for each transaction. A, purchase of traffic marking paint. B, purchase of variable frequency drive for the Northwest 24th Avenue pump station. C, the purchase of ballistic vests for the police department. D, award of installation of 24-inch water main along Sauncey Road from Northwest 9th Avenue to Amarillo Boulevard. E is the award of the Civic Center ADA upgrades and renovation to dressing rooms. F is the approval change order number 4 for Potter County Wellfield 48-inch to 42-inch transmission pipeline project. And G is the approval of agreement for summer food service programs. And H is the sale of property. And I would like to ask that we remove for separate consideration number H. We'll consider that next. Is there any other items that need to be removed by separate consideration, for separate consideration by the commission? Okay, so we're moving H.
You're removing all of H?
Moving H for separate consideration. We will go back and consider it as a whole and see if we're going to.
Because I was considering in my motion to approve H with the exception of the second property
We
listed.
have to, I think, remove it for separate consideration before we do that. And I got instructions in the work session. Is that correct?
I think that would be best. Generally, if we modify a consent item, we need to hold it as a separate
I
consideration.
will move for approval of the consent agenda as presented with the exception of item H.
As presented.
And second, please.
Okay, are there any discussions about the consent agenda other than item H from the audience? From the commission? All those in favor of the consent agenda without item H?
Aye.
Opposed? The consent agenda passes other than item H. Now we'll consider item H, sale of property, sheriff and property sales. There is an item there that we talked about pulling from that, and I think that's what you were going to discuss, right?
Well,
Commissioner Simmons?
I'd be happy to move for approval, item H, with the exception of the second item, specifically cause number 18626E is in Echo, better known as 409 Browning Street.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second that motion.
We're
Okay.
gonna table that piece of
That would be
property.
tabled.
That one piece of property, 18626E, will be tabled for further discussion. The rest of them will be approved under your motion. Is there any discussion from the audience about that proposal? Any from the commission? All those in favor of item H?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes with the exception of 18626E. Public forum. It is, we're not moving back into anything else. So this concludes the agenda for the City Commission's meeting today. It's however customary at this time to allow citizens of this community on matters pertaining to city policy, programs, and services to speak to the commission. And the floor is now open for those comments. And those comments would be things other than what's on the agenda. Do we have anyone who would like to make a comment? Please come forward.
May I make a comment?
Certainly, sir. Please come to the mic. I don't mean to, but if you...
It's not about that.
If you'd identify yourself again, thank you.
I'm still out.
Okay. We're glad you're still here. Go ahead.
We read the paper a lot, my wife and I, but we've never read when the idea for that $113 million thing that you're going to put downtown came up. When was that first discussed with you people?
Well, the discussion started back, I think, in 05 and 06 about what we could do with downtown. And it certainly went through a number of public meetings and a lot of explanation in the paper. I think they almost dedicated a section of the paper to what was going to happen here. So as it's proceeded, we hired a development firm and they proposed that. And it's really pretty magnificent that it isn't affecting property tax to deal with that issue. We're getting an awful lot of improvement.
I've never talked to anybody that likes that
February and
idea.
August,
Which
There were separate votes of the city commission in this room, public meetings in February of 2011 and again in August of 2011.
hope that answers
I
it.
believe it was August the 23rd is the date that comes
If you jot those down, I bet you could pull them up on the Amarillo Globe News Archives. They'd love it if you'd use those.
I phoned him, there's nobody phoning back. The one question, I'm a water nut, I really am. I can tell you all kinds of things. But any of you people know what water evaporation rate in Amarillo of the Lake Meredith is?
Well, isn't it? I think we have an expert over there. Probably match.
Come on, Joe.
You want the average or you want last year's?
Okay, give me last year's.
Last year's would have extended to about 120 something inches. The average was about 78.
Yeah. I've been down here for 21 years, and I never realized there was anything like that. Now, I just sent a letter to the Secretary of the Interior. The way you can stop evaporation is you have to stop two things. You have to stop the heat, and you have to stop the wind. You know what does that?
Moving to someplace other than Amarillo. I don't mean to be flippant. I just don't know how the heck you control those two things here.
You take, what the hell? Believe it or not, I forget what the hell I'm talking about. You know when you go up in the lake and you see those big leaves floating in the water, and they got the flowers on them for seeds of that?
Lily pad?
Lily pad.
There we go.
I'm worse than the governor here.
Well, I shouldn't be laughing at that.
Well, if you put a lily pad in a lake with without motorized ballots. There's three things that happen. First of all, you can look at that lily pad area and you see very little water. Number two, when the wind does come, it can't get underneath. So once again, there's very little evaporation. Number three, you put your hand into the water under lily pad, and it's cooler. So I'll bet you any money that would cut the evaporation rate by 75%. That's what I sent to the Secretary of the Interior. You had this water meeting here with this old girl talking. I talked to her. She gave me her address, but they don't have a phone. They don't have a phone. You can't talk to them. Anyways, that's all I have.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You know, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Crawford brought up interesting verbiage there about Lake Meredith, but I think that it would be very appropriate for us to remind the public that we all must conserve water. And we're going into that time of the year, and it's so important.
Yeah, you know, with voluntary efforts last year, we saved between 8 and 9 million gallons a day of water with voluntary efforts. With a concerted push on that and what we learned last year, I think it could even be higher. I hope we won't have such a critical time. Any other comments from the floor?
Can I ask one question?
Sir, we're kind of over on your time.
Who came up with a 200-year water supply for Amarillo?
If you don't mind, could I visit with you after the meeting? Is it okay if I do that? Because I said,
You're bigger than I am.
I've quoted that, so
Yeah.
I'd be happy to try and visit with you. Would that be
Yeah.
okay after the
Yeah.
meeting? Okay. All right. If there's no other comments, the meeting will stand adjourned. Thank you very much for being here today.